Well, good evening and welcome to the Interact meeting for Pump Station 13-13A, which is part of the State Line Pump Stations and Forcemain's project that's been in the works for a little while. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the pump station and the drivers behind why we're proposing to do this project. So let's go to the next slide, which has an agenda. And I guess I should probably introduce myself. My name's Isaac Crabtree. I'm the managing engineer for the collection systems group for Johnson County Wastewater. And I've been working with HDR on the development of this conceptual design for these pump stations and this project. And I will be co-presenting tonight with Ron Hardy. Ron Hardy is one of the engineers that's been working on this project for HDR. So he'll do the presentation on more of the particulars about the pump station itself. And I'll kind of go through the purpose and the overview. And then we'll kind of round out the presentation with a schedule of events that are coming up in the near future and just the rest of the project. So that's the agenda for tonight. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I guess I should also mention, if there are any questions, we'll have time at the end to ask questions, or you can go ahead and type them into your chat and Anne will let me know if you have questions. So we'll keep it pretty informal, but we will have time at the end if anything comes up. So the purpose of this project, it all originates with the construction, the planning and design and construction of the treatment plant located west of Leawood City Park. I'm sure most people in the area are aware, but if you're not, we just recently finished wrapping up the commissioning of the liquid train at our new treatment plant, which is called the Tomahawk Creek Wastewater Treatment Facility, and that's shown in that picture that was taken this winter. So it's a brand new plant. That treatment plant was put into place. Well, there was already a treatment plant there, and this treatment plant improvements project replaced all the facilities that were there. The reason for that is the wastewater for many, many years has actually bypassed around the treatment plant that was there before for many reasons that I won't get into right now, but it would go through an interceptor sewer to Kansas City, Missouri, and Johnson County would pay Kansas City, Missouri to treat that flow. That was becoming a rather large expense. Kansas City, Missouri is under consent order and has been for several years to separate some of their sewers, and as such, their rates have been increasing. And when their rates increase, the bill that we pay to treat this sewage was increasing as well. And so this project to replace the treatment plant and treat all of our flow generated in that watershed is estimated to save us, the county residents and ratepayers, $785 million over the next 35 years. So very big project, has a huge impact on the finances of the county and all the ratepayers that are a part of our system. How this is relevant is included with this project was extra capacity in this treatment plant to eventually take flows from Leawood. Leawood has a number of places along State Line, and I'll show you that here in a minute, that wastewater flows across State Line into Missouri and is treated by Kansas City, Missouri. And now that we have our new treatment plant and the treatment plant has capacity to handle it, these projects, the 3 pump stations and the Forcemain, will get that flow from Leawood to this treatment plant so that we don't have to pay Kansas City to treat those flows anymore. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Sorry, I got a little wordy there. This is a map showing the sewers in Leawood, and the line on the right is State Line Road, and the dotted line there I think is depicting a Forcemain that goes along. Yeah, that's the Dykes Branch Forcemain that goes along Mission Road. So that gives you kind of an example or a frame of reference of where we're talking about. But these are all different watersheds, and they all of these that are delineated by the different colors are sewer sheds that flow into Kansas City, Missouri, and they flow across the state line at the numbers that are indicated. So those numbers 10, 11, 12, 13, 13A, 14, and 16, those are metering sites, interagency metering facilities, or IMF locations. We meter the flow at those locations because all the flow that goes through there goes to Kansas City, Missouri, and that's how they know how much to charge us for sending wastewater across the state line. So I'll get into this in a minute, but this project is going to end up intercepting flows at those locations, with the exception of number 12, and pump flows from there down to our new treatment plant, so that we're no longer sending dry weather flow to Kansas City, Missouri. This particular presentation tonight is about sites 13 and 13A, which is shown right there, if you can see the cursor. And that is just south of Gates Barbecue, next to 103rd and State Line, just north of Indian Creek, where it crosses under State Line Road. So if you want to go to the next slide. Wanted to talk about this really fast. This is a comparison of bills in the region for various communities. And so Johnson County Wastewater's median sewer bill is just over $45 projected for this year. That's on a monthly basis. You'll notice, in comparison to other nearby communities, that we're very competitive and on the low end. It's not by accident that we have low rates. We have been proactively seeking out projects like this to save our ratepayers money, and that's one of the reasons why we can keep our bills as low as they are. If you want to go to the next slide, in actually looking at these particular pump stations, we're projecting that over the next 20 years we can save around $100 million by disconnecting those IMF sites and pumping the flow to our new treatment plant. So if you'll notice the blue line that has a fairly steep slope, if we did nothing and we continued sending flow to Kansas City, Missouri, that is what the costs would be over time. Roughly $4.5 million a year in a sewer bill to Missouri, or Kansas City, Missouri. Building these pump stations, that's shown in the yellow line. You'll see the initial capital investment up front is $30 to $35 million, in that range. But then the slope is really flat because we're not paying a bill for someone else to treat our sewage. That just represents the costs that we have internally to run the pump station, labor and electrical and stuff like that. So after about 6.5 years or so, we reach a break-even point where the project pays for itself. And then by the time you get out about 20 years, we've saved roughly $100 million by these projections. So that's really the driver behind these projects. If you go to the next slide, this is another map that kind of shows the same thing that we showed you earlier with the different watersheds, but we zoomed in and you can see the streets now. So the pump station 10 and 11, which is what we talked about in the last hour, is up at 89th and State Line Road. And it will collect sewage from the sewers that cross under the state line at that point, and it'll pump it down a Forcemain that goes along State Line Road down to 103rd Street, where it'll intercept flows from that pump station that we're going to be talking about tonight, which is, like I said, south of Gates Barbecue, just north of Indian Creek. And then together, those Forcemains will be combined and will be pumped across 435 through Leawood City Park, and eventually onto the Tomahawk Wastewater Treatment Facility. There is one more pump station, the pump station 1416, which is just to the south of College, right next to the Hallbrook Golf Course. There's a restroom facility that you may be familiar with if you're familiar with the golf course, between holes 18 and 16, I believe. That pump station will take flow from Hallbrook and pump it into the same force main with the others to the treatment plant. So that's kind of a general overview. We've got 3 pump stations, we've got a force main, and all of it will take dry weather flow to the Tomahawk treatment facility there just to the west of the park. I think that was all I was going to present. I'll hand it over to Ron. Ron's going to go through some of more of the technical aspects of the pump station.
Right, thanks, Isaac. Yeah, so I guess the question would be, why are we here tonight? And like Isaac was discussing, we've got this big project coming down here on State Line Road. We got this pump station that we're proposing. We have made a submittal to the city of Leawood, a preliminary development plan. So we've developed a concept to move this forward. So eventually go into final design once we get approval through the city. As part of that process, we are required to do an interact meeting to reach out to the public, gather any comments or questions and get those addressed prior to the Planning Commission meeting, which will be on March 22nd. And so we've highlighted here on a site plan, we have to reach out to 500 feet beyond the boundary of the site itself. And as Isaac noted, kind of the key location marker for this site is the Gates Barbecue. And then we're just north of the Indian Creek and the old Leawood Public Works facility. And there's actually an existing building at this site, and we will be demoing that building and constructing this new facility. So next slide.
Well, and Ron, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. We got a question from Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Nerman, just is about the, wanted to know what the taxpayers paid to construct the plant to Tomahawk, kind of going back to Tomahawk there. What did the taxpayers pay for the construction of the Tomahawk facility?
That actually might be a better question for Mr. Kalis if he's on the phone. I didn't work on that project, or me personally, I didn't. It's a Johnson County project. Was it around 250 million construction cost, Mike? We may have lost Mike. I think it was around $250 million, and that was.
I'm here, Isaac. I
okay.
couldn't find the unmute button.
Okay,
yeah, well,
sorry.
First of all, the taxpayers paid $0. It was all financed through sewer rates. And it was about, the total project was about $340 million. The construction of the plant itself was $260 million. And you may have noticed if you drive by, they actually had to fund the construction of a Evergy substation next to it to strengthen, not only provide the plant, but strengthen the whole electric grid down through that area. And the rest were other associated costs for engineering and administrative costs and so forth, but 340 million in all out of sewer revenues.
Thanks,
so that's
Mike.
what the $45 goes to, is to pay for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to, I guess, further clarify, the ratepayers are paying for those improvements, but it's spread across the entire county. Every single ratepayer pays the same. So as we do different improvements around our system, it's all distributed across the entire county. So everybody benefits as we move around, because now we're looking at other treatment facilities and upgrading those.
Yeah, and just to add on, the gentleman's interested in the financial aspects. Johnson County issues general obligation bonds, but they also pledge the revenues of the system ahead of the general obligation. And so these are basically 20-year GO bonds that they use. And then of course they pay the principal and interest through sewer rates. So.
All right.
So hopefully, hope that, and if you have any more questions, you can ask. We can talk more about it at the end. So I'm going to go to the next slide here, Ron.
Okay. Yeah. So then this just shows a blown up view of the pump station site itself. So this property, will be platting it along with the preliminary development plan. The pump station building itself will sit 40 feet off of right-of-way line meeting all the city setback criteria. And then we're just trying to show at grade, the control building and pump station will be all you'll see at grade. There'll be a screening wall that you can see from 104th Street. We'll have a rendered imaging that will show the site as well at the end here, but trying to get a little more into the technical side. So we'll have to reroute some gravity sewer lines in this area to get them over to the pump station. Then once it goes through the pump station, it will have a little force main that will tie into that larger force main that Isaac was noting coming from the north, heading on down to the south and west to the Tomahawk facility. And then there's some other lines in here. We'll be collecting stormwater and tying that into an existing collection system, which discharges into Indian Creek. That kind of highlights that for the time being. The other thing there's some table of information that the city requires, just summarizes the building footprint. This isn't a manned facility, so there's no parking. So the only vehicle traffic you'll see around here is just maybe a couple times a week, some maintenance crews coming through. And then if there's a wet weather type event, there may be some routine maintenance and some jetback trucks that come through this area. So next slide. So as part of this development plan, we have to develop landscaping. The city has a very in-depth landscaping requirements for new developments. And so as part of this, we're installing quite a bit of trees, and they've actually requested along the north side, we've got a grass island to separate us from the Midas facility. And they've requested some additional screening within that island. And then as well in the middle of between the pump station and the building itself, we've got an electrical transformer, and it's got to be elevated up because of the 100-year flood in Indian Creek in this area. So they've asked us to plant some additional evergreens for screening beyond the screening wall that we'd be constructing here. So next slide. So here's just a perspective view of what the control building could look like. Architecturally, we had another project where we were matching the brick color, so there isn't really a uniform development code within this part of town. And so we just ran with that concept for the time being. So I believe this is a prairie color brick. So the rendering doesn't, or the perspective view doesn't quite match the brick color. So we wanted to give you kind of a real perspective of what that brick could look like. Then within the control building itself, starting from the left-hand side where the double doors are.
Oops, sorry.
No problem. That's going to be an electrical building or electrical room that'll house all the equipment to run the pumps. Then in the middle room where that single door is, that will be a chemical tank. So within that, it's a chemical called bioxide that you inject into the wet well. And so that will help treat odors as it goes through the force main. And as you go through high points within the force main itself, it may release gases at that point. And so that bioxide is there to help treat odors in that instance. And then the final odor control facility that we have specific for the pump station itself is a carbon scrubber unit that's inside. That's basically just a screening wall, open top with a carbon scrubber inside, and that has a blower fan in that. So that will just suck the air out of the pump station, push that through the carbon media and release that to the atmosphere and removing the odors. And next slide. I might have covered a lot of this next slide with that discussion there. So capacity on this pump station is 1.8 million gallons per day, 3 25 horsepower pumps. I believe that's 2 firm, 1 standby pump. Then odor control was the liquid chemical treatment, that bioxide. And then we have the vapor phase carbon scrubber treatment. Then noise, the pumps are submersible underneath the sanitary sewer flow. So you'd have to put your ear up against the hatches to actually hear any noise from the pumps themselves. The Only noise that may be somewhat audible at the site is the blower for the carbon scrubber. But that'll be in a sound dampening enclosure, and that will meet all the city's requirements for decibel levels at the property lines. Then again, I mentioned the Indian Creek floodplain. And so we have to elevate that 2 foot above the 100-year base flood elevation to meet the city's requirements. So this will have a slight elevation. That's why we had the steps out in front, so we could keep that elevated and protected from the 100-year flood. And next slide. As part of our just initial process and evaluating the site, whether it's practical or not, we've reached out to several agencies. So we've reached out to Kansas Department of Agriculture, Division of Water Resources. That's another floodplain permitting perspective. They noted that the project is acceptable to them. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, would we endanger any threatened or endangered species? State Historic Preservation, Indian Creek, we're within a developed site, so we don't have any perspective issues from any historical activities at this site. Then Army Corps of Engineers. Then we got Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks and Tourism, and then just KDHE from a land disturbance perspective. So next. Then, like I noted earlier, here's an aerial image that gives you a perspective of what this site could look like. To the north there with the red roof is the Gates Barbecue. We're just to the south of the Midas facility that Ann has highlighted there. And then off to the left is the Public Works facility. You can see the pump station with the orange hatches on the left-hand side with the site, and then the control building off to the right, and then the proposed vegetation. We developed this rendering before we got the city comments, so it doesn't incorporate the vegetation that we'd be planting in the grass island on the north side. Next slide. And I'll turn it back over to Isaac here to kind of talk about the steps moving forward.
Great, thanks, Ron. Wanted to go through a schedule real fast before we can get to some questions. But the next step after these Interact meetings this week is the public hearing at the Planning Commission, City of Leawood. That's taking place on March 22nd. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them to that email address, planning@leawood.org, and those will eventually make their way to us. You can also contact me directly. If you received a postcard or a letter in the mail, it should have my contact information on that. Beyond the planning development process with the City of Leawood, the next step really is moving into detailed design. So HDR has done a fantastic job bringing us to this point in our conceptual design, but we will actually be selecting a new engineer to move forward with because they're our program manager. They'll still be loosely involved, but we'll actually have a different consultant on board for detailed design. So we'll actually start that selection process here fairly shortly, and they'll be on board sometime this summer. And so design will take approximately 11 months or thereabouts. And so summer of 2023, we'll be looking to bid the project and awarding that to a contractor by the fall of 2023. Usually it takes 3 or 4 months to get them on board after getting bids. So construction slated to start fall of 2023, and construction duration is approximately 11 months to a year. So pump station in service November 2024 is what we're targeting right now. And then throughout the design process, we'll also be working on getting right-of-way and easements acquired. I kind of skipped over that one. So that's the rough schedule of where we're at. Pump station in service 2024. And at this point, I think we're pretty much wrapped up with our presentation materials. If you have any questions, you can ask those now by unmuting and asking the question, or you can type them into the chat box.
Hi, I'm Louis Nerman, and how far off of College Boulevard will this pump station in Hallbrook sit?
I don't have that dimension. Ron, do you?
So this pump station is to the north of 435. The actual Hallbrook pump station 1416 will be given another meeting tomorrow night to give more detail, but I have that information for you. The right-of-way line off College Boulevard is roughly 10 foot behind back of curb on the south side. Then the pump station itself will sit 45 feet off of the right-of-way line. So you're going to be roughly 55 feet from back of curb to where the face of the pump station will be sitting at.
Okay. Have you looked at any other, does that pump station have to sit at that exact spot? Or could it be further camouflaged in maybe some place that wouldn't be so obstructive to the view?
Well, Ron, do you want to answer that? Or I guess I was going to jump in real fast and just mention, I certainly don't mind answering these questions tonight for you, Louis. If you're interested in that pump station though, we actually have another Interact meeting tomorrow night. I believe it's at 6.
It's at the
Yes.
same time tomorrow. Was
Yeah,
your
6.
question specific to the Hallbrook pump station, Louis?
Yes, very much. I have 2 homes here in Hallbrook.
Okay, yeah, the sighting of that is how Isaac was showing where the IMF facilities sit, where we're trying to intercept the sewer lines. You don't have a lot of choice. It was either to the north within City Park, but there's no viable site right there for us to fit a pump station in. So this becomes our only true viable site for the Hallbrook station.
I was hoping the pump station could be moved to the north side of College where there's a big drop off there and you really wouldn't see it and it would be less obtrusive.
That gets into the floodplain along Indian Creek right there. And where this site's at, it's out of the floodplain. And so even if we went over to that site, we would have to build it up and you would still potentially visually see that from College Boulevard. And it just,
But you probably only see maybe the top of the roof. You wouldn't see the entire building.
yeah, then just with grades on that side as well, it's going to be graded down roughly about street grade within there. And then along the cart path for that site, we're going to be building up a berm. That'll be about 5 to 6 feet taller than the trail itself. And then we'll be planting a extensive amount of vegetation and trees on that berm to screen that facility. Sorry, should have had to drink water here with me, but I don't have one. But yeah, we'll be building a berm up and providing screening right there. So even from the berm, the top of that, the currently proposed building will be about 18 foot tall, which would put it roughly 2 foot higher than the top of berm elevation that we're showing right now. So with all the landscaping and everything that's installed there, that will be provide adequate screening for seeing that from any property. Mostly be people drive along by the comfort station. As you just come past it, you could probably look through and potentially see the pump station.
Unfortunately, I got on tonight because I have a conflict. I have
Okay.
a 6 o'clock event tomorrow night at the Nerman Museum. So I couldn't be 2 places at once, but
Okay.
I, for one, and I'm speaking only for myself, I would like to strongly recommend that you take another look at doing something on the north side of College versus the south side, if that is at all feasible.
Okay. Yeah, we can take that comment into consideration. We'll definitely document that and share that with the city. And yeah, of course, this is recorded as well. When this closes out, you'll get prompted with a survey and you can fill that out and we'll be documented. We have to get a summary of these meetings to the city by the end of this week. So then they can take all the information and share that with the planning commission members and consider all these comments for their potential.
Holbrook is gone to great lengths to have design review committees and within Holbrook and so forth to keep up the integrity of our neighborhood. And I just think if there's any way possible to make an adjustment to this plan to put it on the north side, it would, I think you would find a lot of favor with Holbrook residents to that suggestion.
Yeah, we'll definitely take that into advisement as we're pursuing or moving forward with the project. So,
Okay. How will I find out how this proceeds?
you're more than welcome. I believe they give you a virtual option on March 22nd to where you can actually watch the planning commission meeting. I'll have to get confirmation on that. That would be reaching out to the city to verify with them. We gave you that email address. And then if you just called the planning department up there, I believe Debbie will probably pick up the phone there for you. And then you could talk with her to see how you could view it virtually, or if you could do it in person. You can come in March 22nd. They'll actually open it up to the public for questions and comments at that time.
Yeah, and here's the email is here on this slide here, planning@leewood.org. If you want to email them, I put the slide with that there. It's planning@leewood.org. If you have any comments, you can supply them or ask about going to the public hearing.
Yeah, just like Ron said, the comment that you made this evening will go down in the record for tonight's meeting, and that will be considered with the consultant, and it'll also be presented to the city of Leewood when we provide them all the comments that we received. So we certainly appreciate your feedback and appreciate you being here.
And what time is that hearing? On the 22nd.
The meetings start at 6 o'clock. It just depends on what order we are on the agenda as to how quickly they would, I guess is how quickly it comes up in the agenda for the night. So they'll publish the agenda, I believe it's a week in advance. So you can kind of see where we're going to be sitting and roughly time frame. So some of these meetings can extend pretty far into the night, but I'm not anticipating anything like that for this meeting. So
and could you possibly let me know? I'm going to be out of town until the 21st. Is it possible somebody can send me an email to the with the Leewood's comments and schedule prior to the meeting, please?
Yeah, I can send you. What I can do is I can send you a copy of the letter that we sent out to the inviting people to the planning commission meeting. Would that be the best thing to send to Isaac?
Yeah, I think that would be that would probably have the information that he's looking for. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation, and
Sorry
Yeah.
you weren't able to hear for the actual site that you're concerned about, but we're definitely glad to take those questions down and we'll get that documented.
well, if it isn't moved to the north, I, for one, want to see all the opportunities that I can put forward to deter it from going to the south side. So, and I don't think I'm the only one. So, but let's see how this progresses, and I will try to either be at the planning commission meeting or maybe send our legal team to go and show up in my behalf. So, okay, thank you very much for your evening and your
Sure.
presentation.
Right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.